The dust cloud rose like a phantom from hell itself, and Austin Drake knew something was wrong before he even heard the screaming. He had been watering his sorrel mare at the creek just outside Gonzales, Texas, when the thunder of hooves and the creak of stress would cut through the afternoon air. The year was 1878, and the stage routes through this part of Texas were usually quiet this time of day. Austin dropped his canteen and spun toward the sound, his hand instinctively moving to his gun belt before his mind even registered what he was seeing. The stagecoach careened around the bend, swaying dangerously on two wheels before crashing back down with a force that should have shattered the axles. No driver sat in the box. The reins trailed in the dirt, tangling dangerously close to the wheels, and the four horses ran wild with terror gleaming in their eyes. A woman's scream pierced the air again, coming from inside the coach. Austin did not think. 26 years of living in Texas, most of them spent breaking horses and driving cattle, had honed his instincts to a razor's edge. He grabbed his mare's reins, swung into the saddle, and kicked her into a gallop before his boots had even found the stirrups properly. The runaway stage was heading straight for the rocky outcropping that marked the turn toward Gonzales proper. If it hit those rocks at this speed, anyone inside would be killed instantly. Austin leaned low over his mare's neck, urging her faster. The sorrel responded beautifully, her powerful legs eating up the ground between them and the careening coach. He pulled alongside the lead horses first, reaching for the harness of the nearest one. His fingers brushed leather but could not grip it. The stagecoach hit a rut and bounced violently. He heard wood splinter and knew the vehicle would not hold together much longer. Austin pushed his mare harder, pulling slightly ahead now. He would have one chance at this. If he missed, the woman inside would die. If he fell, he would probably die with her. The rocks loomed closer, maybe 30 seconds away at this speed. He stood in his stirrups, timing the rhythm of his mare's gait, then launched himself from the saddle. His body slammed into the side of the lead horse, and his hands scrabbled for purchase on the harness. Leather cut into his palms. His boots dragged in the dirt, and for a terrifying moment, he thought he would be trampled. But then his grip held and he hauled himself up onto the horse's back. The animal was foam-flecked and wild-eyed, beyond reason with panic. Austin worked his way along the harness toward the reins, talking low and steady, despite the fact that his heart was trying to pound its way out of his chest. The rocks were 15 seconds away. 10. His hand closed on the trailing reins. He pulled back hard, throwing all his weight into it, and started turning the team away from the rocks. The horses fought him, too panicked to understand he was trying to save them. The stagecoach swayed sickeningly, tilting so far he was certain it would roll. "Come on," he growled through gritted teeth, hauling on the reins with every ounce of strength he possessed. "Come on, damn you." The lead horse's head came around. The others followed. The stage lurched to the right, the left wheels lifting completely off the ground for a heart-stopping instant. Then they crashed back down and the coach careened past the rocks with maybe 3 feet to spare. Austin kept pulling, kept talking, kept fighting the panicked team until finally, gradually, their speed began to decrease. A quarter-mile past the rocks, the horses were cantering. 100 yards further, they were at a trot. When they finally stopped, Austin's arms felt like they had been pulled from their sockets, and his whole body was shaking with spent adrenaline. He slid from the horse's back, and his knees nearly buckled. Sweat stung his eyes, and his shirt was soaked through. But he was alive, and unless he was very wrong, so was the woman in the coach. He stumbled to the door and yanked it open. "Madam, are you hurt?" The woman who looked back at him was perhaps the most beautiful thing Austin Drake had ever seen. and he had seen a lot of beautiful sunsets over a lot of Texas sky. She was pressed into the corner of the coach, her hands braced against the walls, her face pale beneath a bonnet that had come half undone. Dark auburn hair spilled across her shoulders. Her dress was deep blue, finer than anything usually seen in Gonzales, and her eyes were the color of amber in sunlight. "I think," she said in a voice that shook only slightly, "that you just saved my life." Austin found himself without words. He just stood there holding the door, drinking in the sight of her, until she tentatively reached out one gloved hand. He took it and helped her down from the coach. Her legs were steadier than his, which seemed somehow unfair given what she had just been through. "What happened to your driver?" Austin managed to ask. "Snake," she said, brushing dust from her skirt with trembling hands. "A rattlesnake right in the box with him. It struck him and he fell. I tried to grab the reins through the window, but I could not reach them. The horses just kept running and running." She looked up at him, and her amber eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I thought I was going to die." "You are safe now," Austin said. The words felt inadequate. "Let me check on the driver." He found the man 50 yards back along the road, lying in a crumpled heap. One look was enough. His neck was bent at an angle that told Austin all he needed to know. The snake bite probably would not have killed him, but the fall from the moving stage certainly had. Austin removed his hat and said a quick prayer, then walked back to where the woman waited. His mare had caught up with them and was grazing peacefully as if she had not just participated in the most dangerous ride of Austin's life. "He did not make it," Austin said quietly. "I am sorry." The woman closed her eyes briefly. "His name was Mr. Hutchins. He told me he had been driving this route for 12 years. When she opened her eyes again, the tears had spilled over. "This is awful. Death is part of life out here," Austin said, then immediately felt like a fool for saying something so callous. "I mean, I am sorry. That was not. I should not have put it like that." But the woman was nodding. "No, you are right. I know you are. I am from Boston originally. I have only been in Texas for 3 weeks. Everything here is so different." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so honest and unaffected that Austin felt something twist in his chest. "My name is Austin Drake," he said. "I have a ranch about 5 miles from Gonzales. If you will allow it, I can take you into town. There is a doctor there and a sheriff who will need to know about this." "Adelaide Porter," she said, offering her hand properly this time. Austin shook it, acutely aware of how small her hand felt in his, even through her glove. "And yes, thank you. I would appreciate that very much." Getting Adelaide situated on his horse while he walked alongside proved to be a challenge. She insisted she could walk, but Austin would not hear of it. They compromised by having her ride while Austin led the mare, keeping one hand on the reins of the stagecoach horses as well. The team had calmed considerably, though they still showed the whites of their eyes occasionally. As they walked, Adelaide talked. Austin got the sense she needed to talk, needed to process what had just happened by putting it into words. He was happy to listen. She had come to Texas because her aunt had fallen ill. Her aunt, Mrs. Margaret Preston, ran a boarding house in Gonzales. Adelaide's mother had died 3 years prior, and her father had remarried quickly, too quickly for Adelaide's comfort. The new Mrs. Porter had made it clear that Adelaide's presence in their Boston home was no longer desired, and so when the letter had come from Aunt Margaret requesting help, Adelaide had seen it as a lifeline. "I had never been west of Pennsylvania before this trip," Adelaide said, and there was a wry humor in her voice despite everything. "I thought I was prepared. I read books about Texas. I bought practical dresses and sturdy boots, but nothing really prepares you for the reality of it, does it?" "I reckon not," Austin agreed. I was born here, so I cannot imagine what it must be like seeing it for the first time. Is it very different from Boston? Adelaide laughed, a sound like water over stones. You could fit Boston inside Texas 1,000 times and still have room left over, or so I have been told. But yes, it is different. Everything is so open here, so much sky. Sometimes it feels like you could see forever. Austin glanced up at her. The afternoon sun caught in her auburn hair, turning it to copper and gold. I have always liked the big sky, he said quietly. It makes me feel like anything is possible. They walked in companionable silence for a while. The road to Gonzales was well traveled but empty at this hour. Most folks were either working or resting through the hottest part of the day. Austin found himself acutely aware of every breath Adelaide took, every small movement she made to keep her balance on the mare. He had never been affected by a woman like this before. He had courted a girl named Sarah 2 years back, but she had married a banker from San Antonio, and Austin had discovered he was not particularly heartbroken about it. This feeling, this awareness of Adelaide, was entirely different. "May I ask you something?" Adelaide said after a while. "Of course. When you jumped onto that horse, were you afraid?" Austin considered the question. "I did not have time to be afraid. I just knew I had to stop the stage or you would be killed. The fear came after, when it was over." "You were shaking when you opened the door," Adelaide said softly. "I saw that. But you still helped me down so gently, and then you went to check on Mr. Hutchins even though you must have been exhausted. That takes a different kind of courage, I think." Austin felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. "I just did what needed doing." "Most men would say that. I do not think most men would mean it the way you do." They reached Gonzales as the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town was small but growing, with a main street lined with businesses and houses spreading outward in a loose grid. The boarding house Adelaide's aunt ran was on the east side of town, a 2-story building with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. Austin helped Adelaide down from the mare, and this time his hands spanned her waist for the brief moment it took to lower her to the ground. She steadied herself with her hands on his shoulders, and they stood there for a heartbeat longer than necessary, close enough that he could see flecks of green in her amber eyes. "Thank you," Adelaide whispered, "for everything." "I should take you inside," Austin said, though he made no move to step away. "Your aunt will be worried." The door to the boarding house flew open before Adelaide could respond. A woman in her 50s, handsome despite the worry lines around her eyes, rushed down the steps. "Adelaide, thank God." "When the stage did not arrive on time, I feared the worst." She pulled Adelaide into a fierce embrace, then held her at arm's length to look her over. "Are you hurt? What happened?" Adelaide explained while Austin stood awkwardly by, holding the horses. Margaret Preston was clearly a force to be reckoned with. She fussed over Adelaide, demanded to know every detail, and then turned her formidable attention to Austin. "You are the young man who saved her." "Yes, madam. Austin Drake. I know your father. Good man. You have the same look about you." She studied him with sharp eyes. "Come inside. Both of you. Adelaide, you need to rest. Mr. Drake, you need water and food, and do not argue with me. You look half dead on your feet." Austin found himself shepherded inside with a firmness that brooked no argument. The boarding house was cool and clean, with lace curtains and sturdy furniture. Margaret sat them both down at a large dining table and disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with cold water, bread, cheese, and sliced ham. "Eat," she commanded. "Adelaide, tell me everything again, slower this time." As Adelaide recounted the story, several other residents of the boarding house drifted in, drawn by the commotion. There was Mr. Chen, a quiet man who worked at the general store. Mrs. Feldman, a widow who did sewing and mending. Young Tommy Roberts, an apprentice at the blacksmith shop who could not have been more than 18. They all listened with rapt attention as Adelaide described the runaway stage and Austin's dramatic rescue. Austin concentrated on his food and tried to ignore the way everyone kept looking at him like he was some kind of hero. He had just done what anyone would do. Well, what anyone with a fast horse and a fair amount of luck would do anyway. "The sheriff will need to be told," Margaret said when Adelaide finished, "and someone will need to retrieve Mr. Hutchins' body." "I will go to the sheriff now," Austin said, pushing back from the table. He felt steadier with food in his stomach, though his arms still ached from wrestling with the stagecoach team. "I will come with you," Adelaide said, standing as well. "Adelaide, you need to rest," Margaret protested. "I need to give my statement," Adelaide said firmly. "And I will not send Mr. Drake to do this alone when I was the one who was there." Margaret looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Adelaide's expression stopped her. "Very well, but straight there and straight back, do you understand?" The sheriff's office was a small building near the center of town. Sheriff Tom Morgan was a big man in his 40s with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that missed nothing. He listened to their story without interruption, occasionally making notes in a ledger. "Hell of a thing," he said when they finished. "Begging your pardon for the language, Miss Porter, I will get some men together and we will go fetch Hutchins. His wife will need to be told." He stood and shook Austin's hand. "That was fine work you did, son. Your father would be proud." Austin nodded, unsure what to say. The mention of his father brought a familiar ache. Jonathan Drake had died 18 months ago, thrown from a horse that had stepped in a gopher hole and broken its leg. Austin had been running the ranch alone ever since, with help from 2 hired hands. Outside the sheriff's office, the sunset was in full glory now, the sky ablaze with color. Adelaide stood on the wooden sidewalk and tipped her head back to watch it, and Austin found himself watching her instead of the sky. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "I do not think I have ever seen a sunset quite like the ones here." "They are pretty special," Austin agreed. "Sometimes in the summer, when the heat has been particularly bad, the sunsets look like the whole world is on fire." Adelaide turned to face him. In the golden light, she looked almost otherworldly, like something from a painting or a dream. "Mr. Drake, I do not know how to properly thank you for what you did today. You risked your life for mine and we had never even met." "Austin," he said. "Please, just Austin." "And you do not need to thank me." "I do, though, and I will find a way." She smiled, and the smile transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "Perhaps you would come to dinner tomorrow evening at the boarding house. My aunt is an excellent cook, and I make a fair hand at baking when I am not being thrown about in runaway stagecoaches." Austin felt his heart kick against his ribs. "I would like that very much." "Good." Adelaide reached out and touched his arm briefly, a gesture of warmth and connection. "Tomorrow, then. Shall we say 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock, Austin repeated. He felt like he should say something else, something meaningful, but his tongue seemed to have tied itself in knots. Adelaide's smile widened like she could read his thoughts. "I should go back before my aunt sends out a search party." "Good evening, Austin." "Good evening, Adelaide." He watched her walk back toward the boarding house, her blue dress swaying with each step until she disappeared around the corner. Then he stood there for several more minutes, watching the sunset and trying to understand what had just happened to him. He had met a woman, saved her life, and now he was going to dinner. Simple enough. Except it did not feel simple at all. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet, and the whole world had rearranged itself into a new configuration. one where Adelaide Porter was at the center of everything. Austin rode home slowly, his mare picking her way along the familiar path in the gathering dark. The ranch was quiet when he arrived. His two hands, Pete and Carlos, had finished the day's work and retired to the bunkhouse. Austin took care of his horse, rubbing her down and giving her extra oats for her efforts today, then walked to the main house. It was a modest place, 3 rooms and a porch, but it had been built by his grandfather and it was solid. Austin lit a lamp and sat at the kitchen table, suddenly aware of how empty the house felt. His father had rattled around in here alone after Austin's mother had died in childbirth when Austin was just 2 years old. Austin had never known her, but his father had talked about her sometimes, late at night when the whiskey made him sentimental. He had said she was the light of his life, that losing her had dimmed the whole world. Austin had never understood that until now. One afternoon with Adelaide and he felt like something fundamental had changed inside him. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. He slept poorly that night, his dreams full of runaway stages and auburn hair and amber eyes. When he woke before dawn, as was his habit, he felt restless and eager in a way he had not experienced in years. The day stretched ahead of him full of the usual tasks: feeding livestock, mending fences, checking the water levels in the creek, but all he could think about was dinner at 6 o'clock. Pete noticed his distraction immediately. "You all right, boss? You have been staring at that fence post for 5 minutes without doing a damn thing with it." "I am fine," Austin said, picking up his hammer. "Just thinking. Must be some powerful thinking." Pete was in his 50s, grizzled and weathered, and had worked for Austin's father before Austin was born. He had seen Austin grow up and had no qualms about speaking his mind. "Heard you played hero yesterday. Word travels fast in a small town. I just did what needed doing." "So I heard." "Also heard the lady you rescued is quite a beauty. Boston girl staying at the Preston place." Austin drove a nail with more force than necessary. "She is coming from Boston, yes." Pete's grin was knowing. "That's so. Well, that explains the mooning about." "I am not mooning." "Sure you are not. When are you seeing her again?" "Tonight. Dinner." Austin could not quite keep the anticipation out of his voice. "Good for you, son. Your daddy always said you needed a good woman to settle down with. He would be happy to know you are finally taking an interest." "It is just dinner, Pete. If you say so." Pete picked up another fence post. "But you might want to clean yourself up a bit before you go. Maybe put on that blue shirt your daddy bought for church. Brought out your eyes, he always said." Austin did not dignify that with a response, but when 6 o'clock drew near, he found himself washing carefully with the good soap, shaving twice to make sure he did not miss any spots, and yes, putting on the blue shirt. He looked at himself in the small mirror over the wash basin and barely recognized the nervous man staring back. "It is just dinner," he told his reflection. The reflection did not look convinced. The boarding house was lit up warmly when he arrived, light spilling from the windows into the dusty street. Austin tied his horse and stood for a moment, gathering his courage. He had faced down angry bulls and broken wild horses and stopped a runaway stagecoach, but walking up to that front door felt like the bravest thing he had ever done. Adelaide opened the door before he could knock. She wore a dress of soft green that made her eyes glow, and her auburn hair was swept up in a style that looked effortlessly elegant. Austin forgot how to breathe. "You came," she said, and she sounded genuinely pleased, like there had been doubt. "I said I would." "Yes, but I worried that in the clear light of day you might reconsider. Yesterday was rather dramatic. Perhaps you decided you wanted nothing more to do with the woman whose near death you witnessed." "That thought never crossed my mind," Austin said honestly. "Not even once." Adelaide's smile could have lit the whole town. "Come in. Aunt Margaret has outdone herself. I think she might have cooked enough food for 20 people instead of just our usual household." The dining room table was indeed laden with food. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread, and what looked like 3 different pies. The other residents of the boarding house were there as well, and Austin found himself subjected to another round of introductions and effusive thanks for his heroism the previous day. He sat next to Adelaide, acutely aware of her presence. Every time her hand brushed his while reaching for a dish, he felt a spark of awareness. Every time she laughed at something someone said, he found himself wanting to say something that would make her laugh again. The conversation ranged over various topics. Mr. Chen talked about the new shipment of goods expected at the general store. Mrs. Feldman complained good-naturedly about the rising cost of thread. Young Tommy was full of enthusiasm about a new technique he was learning at the blacksmith shop. Through it all, Austin kept finding his gaze drawn back to Adelaide. She was smart. That was the first thing he noticed. When the conversation turned to politics, she had opinions and voiced them clearly and without apology. She thought the government needed to do more for settlers, that the treatment of former slaves in the South was a national disgrace, that women should have more rights, including the vote. Some of her views made the other diners uncomfortable, he could tell, but she spoke with such conviction that no one argued with her. She was also kind. When Mr. Chen mentioned struggling with English, Adelaide offered to help him practice, refusing to hear his protests that he could not pay her. When young Tommy knocked over his water glass in his excitement, she was the first to grab a cloth and assure him it was no trouble, and she was interested in everything. She asked Austin question after question about the ranch, about raising cattle, about life in Texas. She wanted to know what it was like growing up here, what his childhood had been like, what he dreamed about for the future. Austin found himself talking more than he usually did in a week, drawn out by her genuine curiosity. After dinner, Margaret shooed them out onto the porch. "You young people go get some air. We will handle the cleanup." The night was clear and cool, stars blazing overhead in their millions. Austin and Adelaide sat on the porch steps, a respectable foot of space between them, and looked up at the vast sky. "I have never seen so many stars," Adelaide said quietly. "In Boston, you can barely see them for all the lights and smoke." "My father used to say the stars were all the people who had gone before us, watching over us," Austin said. "I never knew if I believed that, but I liked the idea. That he might be up there somewhere, keeping an eye on things. When did you lose him?" 18 months ago. Horse threw him. It was quick, at least. He did not suffer." Adelaide reached over and took his hand. The gesture was simple and unself-conscious, a gesture of comfort. "I am sorry. I lost my mother 3 years ago to consumption. It was not quick. I watched her waste away over months, unable to help. Sometimes I do not know which is worse, sudden loss or slow." "Both are awful," Austin said, "just in different ways." He looked down at their joined hands, her pale fingers intertwined with his sun-brown ones. "I am glad you came to Texas, even though the circumstances were not ideal." "So am I," Adelaide said softly. "I was so angry when I had to leave Boston. I felt like I was being driven out of my home, cast aside because I was inconvenient. But now, sitting here with you, looking at these stars, I think maybe it was all meant to happen this way. Maybe I was meant to come here." Austin turned to look at her. Her face was tilted up to the stars, her profile clean and lovely in the starlight. "Do you believe in fate?" "I do not know. I never did before. But how else do you explain what happened yesterday? If the stage had left an hour later or earlier, you would not have been at that creek." if you had watered your horse somewhere else, or if the snake had not frightened the horses at that exact moment, everything would be different. It seems like too many coincidences to be just chance. My father used to say that God works in mysterious ways. Was your father a religious man? Not particularly, but he believed in something bigger than himself. He said no man could look at a Texas sunset or a newborn calf and not believe in some kind of creator. Adelaide laughed softly. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was stubborn as a mule, but wise. Austin squeezed her hand gently. What about your father? You said he remarried quickly after your mother passed. Adelaide's expression tightened. My father is a banker. He thinks in terms of assets and liabilities. After my mother died, I became a liability. An unmarried daughter with opinions is not an asset to a man trying to climb the social ladder in Boston. His new wife is 28, only 6 years older than I am, and she made it very clear that there was not room for both of us in that house. I am sorry. That must have been painful. It was. It still is sometimes, but it also freed me. I can choose my own path now without worrying about disappointing him or living up to his expectations. She turned to face Austin fully. I know I have only been here a day, but already I feel more at home than I did in my father's house. Does that sound foolish? No, Austin said and meant it. Sometimes home is not about a place. It is about where you are meant to be. They sat in silence for a while, hands still joined, surrounded by the sounds of the Texas night. Somewhere a coyote called, a long haunting note. Crickets sang in the grass. The breeze carried the scent of dust and sage and coming rain. Austin, Adelaide said finally, I need to tell you something about why I was on that stage. You said your aunt needed help with the boarding house. That is part of it, but there is more. Adelaide took a deep breath. In Boston, there was a man. His name was Mr. Whitmore. He was a business associate of my father's, a widower with 3 children. My father decided we would make a good match. Mr. Whitmore is 42 years old. He offered my father a very favorable business deal in exchange for my hand in marriage. Austin felt anger kindle in his chest. Your father tried to sell you. In effect, yes. I refused, of course. I told my father I would not marry a man I did not love, especially not one old enough to be my father. My father was furious. His new wife saw an opportunity and suggested that perhaps I should go help Aunt Margaret in Texas for a while until I became more reasonable. They bought me a one-way ticket and made it very clear I was not welcome to return until I agreed to the match. But you will not agree. No, I would rather make my own way here, even if it means I never see Boston again. Adelaide's voice was fierce. I will not be sold like property. I will not marry for duty or money or social standing. If I marry, it will be because I love someone and they love me in return. Austin felt something settle into place inside him, something he had not known was missing until this moment. You are a remarkable woman, Adelaide Porter. I am a stubborn woman, Adelaide corrected, but she was smiling. My mother used to say I had enough stubbornness for 3 people. She meant it as a compliment, I think. It is a compliment. Stubborn people survive. They do not give up when things get hard. Austin raised her hand and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture of respect and something more. I am glad you came to Texas, Adelaide, gladder than I can properly say. Adelaide's breath caught. Austin, we have only known each other a day. I know. And maybe I am crazy for saying this, but I do not care. I feel like I have been waiting for you without knowing I was waiting. Does that make any sense? Perfect sense, Adelaide whispered, because I feel the same way. They leaned toward each other slowly, giving each other time to pull back, but neither did. The kiss was soft and sweet, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, Adelaide was blushing, and Austin felt like he could take on the whole world with one hand tied behind his back. "I should probably go inside," Adelaide said, but she made no move to stand up. "It is getting late." "Probably," Austin agreed, also not moving. They sat there for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, stealing kisses when the conversation lulled, until Margaret opened the door and pointedly cleared her throat. "Adelaide, it is past 10 o'clock. Mr. Drake, I am sure you have an early morning tomorrow." "Yes, madam," Austin said, standing reluctantly. He helped Adelaide to her feet, reluctant to let go of her hand. "Thank you for dinner. It was wonderful." "You are welcome here any time," Margaret said, and her expression had softened. "You are a good man, Austin Drake. Your father raised you right." Austin rode home in a daze, barely aware of the path his horse was following. All he could think about was Adelaide, her laugh, her convictions, her courage in leaving everything she knew behind to start over. The way she kissed, soft and tentative but with a promise of more. The way she looked at him like he was something special. He was falling in love with her. Maybe he was already in love with her. It should have terrified him, but instead he felt exhilarated. For the first time since his father died, the future looked bright instead of just bleak and full of hard work. Over the next few weeks, Austin found himself riding into Gonzales every evening. Sometimes he would eat dinner at the boarding house, and sometimes he would take Adelaide on walks around town. They would stroll down Main Street hand in hand, Adelaide exclaiming over things that seemed mundane to Austin but were novel to her. The way the blacksmith worked iron, the variety of goods in the general store, the small schoolhouse where the town's dozen children learned their letters. She threw herself into helping her aunt with the boarding house. Margaret's illness, it turned out, was a persistent cough and fatigue that the doctor said was probably the lingering effects of pneumonia from the previous winter. Adelaide took over much of the heavy work, cleaning rooms and cooking meals and keeping the books. She had a head for numbers, something she attributed to growing up in a banker's household, and soon had the boarding house's finances organized more efficiently than they had been in years. But it was the evenings Austin treasured most. After the work was done and the other residents had retired, he and Adelaide would sit on the porch and talk. She told him about Boston, about libraries full of books and theaters that showed plays and museums filled with art. He told her about the ranch, about the satisfaction of raising healthy cattle, and the peace of riding out across open land with nothing but sky above. They talked about their dreams. Adelaide wanted to make something of herself, to prove to her father that she was not a liability but a person of worth. She thought she might like to teach, or write, or do something that helped people. Austin wanted to expand the ranch, maybe breed horses as well as cattle. He wanted to build something that would last, something his children and grandchildren could carry on. "Tell me about the ranch," Adelaide said one evening about 3 weeks after they met. "I want to see where you live, what you do every day." "It is not fancy," Austin warned. "Just a small house and some pastureland." "I do not care if it is fancy, I want to see your life." Adelaide took his hand. "Will you take me there tomorrow? Aunt Margaret can spare me for an afternoon." Austin's heart leapt. "I would like that. I will come get you after lunch." He spent the next morning in a frenzy of cleaning. Pete and Carlos watched with barely concealed amusement as Austin scrubbed the kitchen, swept the floors, and even washed the windows. "She must be something special," Pete said, leaning on his rake. "I have known you 26 years, and I have never seen you clean a window." "She is special," Austin said simply. "More than special," Pete's expression softened. "Your daddy would be happy, son. He always worried you would end up alone out here." When Austin rode into town to collect Adelaide, She was waiting on the porch in a simple brown dress that was more practical than her usual attire. She had a bonnet to protect her from the sun and looked more excited than Austin had ever seen her. The ride to the ranch took about 45 minutes. Adelaide rode behind Austin on his horse, her arms around his waist, and he found himself hyper-aware of every place their bodies touched. She exclaimed over the landscape, the rolling hills and scattered trees, the way the grass rippled in the wind like waves on an ocean. "It is so beautiful," she said into his ear. "So much space. In Boston, everything is crowded together. Here you can actually see the shape of the land." The ranch came into view, modest but well kept. The house stood on a slight rise, the barn and corrals spread out below. Cattle grazed in the distance, red and white dots against the brown grass. Adelaide slid down from the horse before Austin could help her and turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "This is wonderful," she said. "I can see why you love it here." Austin showed her around, introducing her to Pete and Carlos, who were gentlemen enough to remove their hats and say, "Madam," but not gentlemen enough to completely hide their grins. He showed her the barn, the cattle, the creek where he had been watering his horse the day the stagecoach ran wild. "This is where it all started," Adelaide said, standing on the creek bank. "If you had been anywhere else that day, we never would have met." "I have thought about that," Austin admitted. "About all the little things that had to happen just right for us to be here now. It makes me believe in fate." They walked back to the house and Austin made coffee, feeling oddly nervous about having Adelaide in his space. She moved through the rooms slowly, looking at everything. His father's old rifle over the fireplace, the books on the shelf, mostly about ranching and history. The photograph of Austin's mother, young and serious, the only image of her that existed. "She was beautiful," Adelaide said, studying the photograph. "You have her eyes." "So I have been told. I do not remember her, though. She died when I was too young." Adelaide turned to face him. "Austin, do you ever feel lonely out here?" The question caught him off guard. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Especially after my father passed. The house feels too big for just one person, even though it is not actually that big." "I have been lonely too," Adelaide said softly. "Even in Boston, surrounded by people, I felt alone, like I was going through the motions of life without really living it." She crossed to where he stood. "But I do not feel lonely when I am with you." "Neither do I," Austin said. "When I am with you, everything feels right. Like the pieces of my life are finally fitting together the way they are supposed to." "Austin, I need to tell you something." Adelaide's voice was serious now, and Austin felt his stomach tighten with worry. "What is it?" "I have been in Texas for a month now. In that time, I have gotten 3 letters from my father. He wants me to come back to Boston and marry Mr. Whitmore. He says if I do not return by the end of summer, he will cut me off completely. I will have no inheritance, no family support, nothing." Austin felt cold dread seep into his bones. "What are you going to do?" "I do not know." Adelaide twisted her hands together, a rare sign of anxiety. "My aunt has been wonderful, but I cannot live on her charity forever. I need to find a way to support myself, and the options for women are limited. I could try to find work as a teacher or a governess, but those positions are scarce out here. Or I could go back to Boston and marry a man I do not love and spend the rest of my life miserable but financially secure." "There is a third option," Austin heard himself say. Adelaide looked up at him, her amber eyes wide and questioning. "You could marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Austin had not planned to say them, not yet, but now that they were out he knew they were right. He wanted to spend his life with this woman. He wanted to wake up next to her every morning and fall asleep with her every night. He wanted to build something with her, a partnership and a family and a future. "Austin, We have only known each other a month, Adelaide said, but her voice was wondering rather than dismissive. I know. And maybe I am being a fool, rushing into this. But I love you, Adelaide. I have loved you since you looked at me from that stagecoach with dirt on your face and tears in your eyes, and thanked me for saving your life. I do not need more time to know that you are what I have been looking for, even though I did not know I was looking. I love you too, Adelaide whispered. I have been trying not to because it seemed too fast, too impossible, but I cannot help it. You are everything I never knew I wanted. You are kind and brave and honest. You listen when I talk, and you do not try to change me or make me smaller to fit into some idea of what a woman should be. Austin pulled her close, cradling her face in his hands. Then marry me. We will figure out the rest as we go. I am not a rich man, but the ranch is profitable and I can provide for you. You would never want for anything. I do not care about money, Adelaide said fiercely. I care about you. I care about building a life with someone who sees me as an equal partner, not as property or decoration. I care about love. Then say yes. Adelaide reached up and pulled his face down to hers. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, Austin Drake, I will marry you. The kiss was deep and full of promise. Austin felt like his heart might burst from his chest. When they finally broke apart, Adelaide was laughing and crying at the same time. I cannot believe I am engaged, she said. I came to Texas thinking my life was over, and instead I found everything I ever wanted. When do you want to get married? Austin asked. He wanted to say tomorrow or this afternoon or right now, but he knew there were proprieties to observe. As soon as possible, Adelaide said decisively. I do not want to wait, unless you think we should have a long engagement. No, Austin said immediately. No long engagement, a month. 2 weeks. Perfect. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans. They would have a simple ceremony at the church in Gonzales. Adelaide's aunt would be there, and Pete and Carlos and whoever else from town wanted to come. Adelaide would move to the ranch afterward. They would need to buy some furniture, Adelaide pointed out, as the house currently had the bare minimum. Austin agreed readily. He wanted her to make the house into their home, to put her stamp on it. When he took her back to town that evening, they were both giddy with excitement. Margaret took one look at them and immediately knew what had happened. You are engaged, she said, and it was not a question. Yes, Adelaide said, showing her the simple gold ring that had been Austin's grandmother's. Austin had retrieved it from the locked box where his father had kept important papers, and it had fit Adelaide's finger perfectly, which seemed like another sign that this was meant to be. Well, Margaret said, and then to Austin's surprise, she pulled him into a fierce hug. You take good care of my niece, Austin Drake. She is the best thing to come out of my family in 2 generations. I will, Austin promised. I swear I will. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Adelaide and Margaret transformed the small church with wildflowers and ribbons. Adelaide sewed herself a wedding dress, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Austin bought a new suit, his first, and felt like a fraud wearing it, until Adelaide told him he looked handsome enough to steal her breath. The whole town turned out for the wedding. Sheriff Morgan was there, and Mr. Chen and Mrs. Feldman and young Tommy. Half the ranchers in the county came, men who had known Austin's father and wanted to see Jonathan Drake's son married. Even some of the townspeople who Adelaide had only met in passing came, drawn by the romance of it all. When Adelaide walked down the aisle on her aunt's arm, Austin forgot how to breathe. She was radiant, her auburn hair swept up and crowned with a circlet of flowers, her amber eyes bright with joy. He barely heard the preacher's words, too focused on Adelaide's face, on the way she looked at him like he was everything she had ever wanted. They exchanged vows in steady voices. Austin slid a gold band onto Adelaide's finger to join the engagement ring. She placed a matching band on his. And when the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Austin did so with a joy so fierce it bordered on pain. The townspeople cheered. Margaret wept openly. Pete and Carlos clapped Austin on the back hard enough to bruise. And through it all, Austin held Adelaide's hand and felt like the luckiest man in Texas, possibly the world. The reception was held at the boarding house, in the garden behind the building. There was food and music and dancing. Austin, who had never been much for dancing, found himself whirling Adelaide around to the sound of a fiddle and guitar. She was light in his arms, laughing with pure happiness, and he thought he could dance forever if it meant seeing her this happy. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Austin and Adelaide slipped away. They rode to the ranch together, Adelaide in front this time, Austin's arms around her waist. When they arrived, he carried her over the threshold of the house that was now their home. That night, they lay together in Austin's bed, which would now be their bed, and talked softly about the future. About children they hoped to have, about improvements they wanted to make to the ranch, about the life they would build together. Adelaide fell asleep with her head on Austin's chest, and he lay awake for a long time after, listening to her breathe and marveling at the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. In the morning, Adelaide woke before Austin, a rarity. She slipped out of bed and padded to the window, looking out over the ranch land. Austin watched her from the bed, memorizing the sight of her silhouetted against the dawn light. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Adelaide turned to him with a smile. "I was thinking about how I need to tell you something. Something I should have mentioned yesterday, but the day was so perfect I did not want to complicate it." Austin sat up, concerned. "What is it?" Adelaide came back to the bed and sat down beside him. She took his hands in hers. "Austin, I need you to know something about me. It is why I was so determined to escape Boston and why I will never go back, even if my father relents about the marriage." "You can tell me anything," Austin said. Adelaide took a deep breath. "I cannot have children." Austin blinked, trying to process this. "What do you mean?" "I had scarlet fever when I was 15. It nearly killed me. When I recovered, the doctor told my mother that the fever had damaged me inside and that it was very unlikely I would ever be able to conceive. My mother was devastated. She cried for days. My father was furious. He said I had become damaged goods, that no decent man would want a wife who could not give him heirs." "Adelaide," Austin started, but she held up a hand. "Please let me finish. When Mr. Whitmore approached my father about marrying me, he knew about my condition. He already had children from his first marriage and did not want more. That is why he was willing to marry me despite the, as my father put it, defect. But I could not bear to marry him, knowing that he saw me as nothing more than a housekeeper he could bed legally." Tears streamed down Adelaide's face now. "I should have told you before yesterday, before we married, but I was afraid. I was afraid you would not want me if you knew." Austin pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Adelaide, look at me." When she raised her tear-stained face, he cupped it gently in his hands. "I married you because I love you. Not because I need heirs or want children, but because you are smart and brave and kind and you make me want to be a better man. If we have children, that would be wonderful. If we do not, then we will have each other, and that is enough. More than enough." "You mean that?" Adelaide whispered. "I have never meant anything more in my life." Austin kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You are not damaged goods. You are perfect exactly as you are, and if your father cannot see that, then he is a fool and you are well rid of him." Adelaide clung to him, sobbing with what Austin realized was relief. "I was so afraid," she said between sobs. So afraid you would send me away. Never, Austin said fiercely. You are my wife, Adelaide, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death do us part. I meant those vows. They held each other as the sun rose fully, bathing the room in golden light. After a while, Adelaide's tears subsided and she pulled back to look at Austin with puffy eyes and a genuine smile. I do not deserve you, she said. Yes, you do. We deserve each other. Austin kissed her again, soft and sweet. Now, how about I make us some breakfast? You are going to need your strength if I am going to put you to work around here. Adelaide laughed, the sound like music. Put me to work. I am a rancher's wife now. I expect I will have plenty to do. She was right about that. Adelaide threw herself into ranch life with the same enthusiasm she had shown for everything else. She learned to cook for ranch hands, hearty meals that stuck to the ribs. She learned to tend the garden, growing vegetables to supplement their diet. She learned to ride properly, graduating from sitting behind Austin to handling her own horse. She even learned to help with some of the lighter ranch work, mending tack and keeping the books. Pete and Carlos, initially skeptical about having a city woman at the ranch, quickly came to adore her. She was always ready with a kind word or a cool drink on hot days. She remembered their birthdays and their favorite foods. She treated them like family rather than employees, and they returned that affection tenfold. The months passed into a year, then two. The ranch prospered under Austin and Adelaide's joint management. They bought more cattle, expanded the pasture land, and began breeding horses as Austin had dreamed of doing. The little house got added onto, gaining 2 more rooms and a proper dining area. Adelaide filled it with furniture and curtains and small touches that made it feel like a real home. They became fixtures in Gonzales society. Austin served a term as town councilman. Adelaide started a small school for the children of ranchers and farmers who lived too far out to attend the town school regularly. She taught them reading and writing and mathematics 3 days a week in the room they had added onto the house for that purpose. But despite their full and happy life, there was a shadow that neither of them talked about. Adelaide had been right about her condition. No children came. After 2 years, then 3, it became clear that none would. They did not discuss it often, but Austin saw the way Adelaide looked at the children she taught, with a longing she thought she hid. He saw the way she would touch her stomach sometimes when she thought he was not watching, as if hoping to feel something that would never be there. It was after one of these moments, 4 years into their marriage, that Austin brought up a possibility he had been considering for months. Adelaide, he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, what would you think about adoption? Adelaide turned to him, surprise written across her face. Adoption. There are children who need homes, orphans, foundlings, children whose parents died and left them with no one. Austin took her hand. We have room here and love to give. Why not offer it to a child who needs it? But you would have no heir, Adelaide said carefully. The ranch would not stay in your family. Any child we raise would be my family, Austin said firmly. Blood is not the only thing that makes a family. Love does that. Commitment does that. He squeezed her hand. What do you say? Should we see if there are any children in need of a home? Adelaide's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I would like that very much. They wrote to orphanages in San Antonio and Austin and made inquiries with Sheriff Morgan about any local children who might need a home. The process was slower than they hoped, with lots of letters and paperwork and waiting. But finally, 6 months later, they got word that there were 2 siblings in San Antonio who needed a family. Austin and Adelaide made the trip to San Antonio together, a journey of several days. The orphanage was a grim place, overcrowded and underfunded. The matron who ran it was harried but kind, doing her best with limited resources. She led them to a room where two children waited. A boy, perhaps 7 years old, with dark hair and wary brown eyes, and a girl, maybe 5, with tangled blonde hair and a solemn expression. Both were too thin and too quiet, the kind of quiet that came from learning not to hope for too much. "This is William and Sarah," the matron said. "Their parents died of cholera 2 years ago. They have been with us ever since. William is a good worker, very responsible. Sarah is shy but sweet. They are very attached to each other. We have tried to place them before, but most people only want to take one child and they refuse to be separated." Austin and Adelaide exchanged a look. They had planned to adopt one child. But looking at William's protective stance in front of his little sister, at the way Sarah gripped the back of William's shirt with one small fist, Austin knew they could not separate them. "We will take them both," Adelaide said firmly. The matron's face lit up. "Both, you are certain?" "Absolutely certain," Austin agreed. He knelt down to the children's level. "William, Sarah, my name is Austin and this is my wife Adelaide. We have a ranch in Gonzales with horses and cattle and lots of room to run. We would like you to come live with us if you would like that. You would have your own beds and 3 meals a day, and we would make sure you went to school. What do you think?" William looked at Austin with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "Both of us?" he asked, his voice hoarse with disuse. "You would take both of us?" "Both of you," Adelaide confirmed, kneeling beside Austin. "We would never separate you. You are a family, and families should stay together." Sarah peeked out from behind her brother. "Would I have a doll?" she asked in a tiny voice. "I have never had a doll." Adelaide felt her heart break and mend at the same time. "Yes, sweetheart, you will have a doll, as many dolls as you want." The children looked at each other, having some silent conversation that only siblings could have. Then William nodded. "We will go with you," he said. "But if you are mean to Sarah, I will run away and take her with me." "That is fair," Austin said seriously. "But I promise you, we will never be mean to either of you. We will do our best to be good parents, and if we make mistakes, you can tell us and we will try to do better." The journey back to Gonzales was an adventure. William was cautiously curious about everything, asking questions about the landscape and the people they passed. Sarah was more reserved, but she held tight to the rag doll Adelaide had bought her in San Antonio, and sometimes smiled when she thought no one was looking. By the time they reached the ranch, Pete and Carlos had prepared the new bedroom. Adelaide had sewn curtains and quilts in anticipation. There were toys waiting and books and clothes that would actually fit instead of the threadbare hand-me-downs the children had worn at the orphanage. Sarah cried when she saw the room, overwhelmed by having her own space, her own things. William tried to be stoic, but Austin saw his chin tremble. That night, Adelaide found both children had abandoned their separate beds and were curled up together on the floor. "Old habits," Austin said quietly, helping Adelaide cover them with blankets. "They will need time." "We have time," Adelaide replied. "All the time in the world." She was right. It took months for William and Sarah to truly believe they were safe, that they would not be sent away or separated. There were nightmares and tears. There were times when William would hoard food, unable to break the habit of never knowing when the next meal might come. There were times when Sarah would not speak for days, retreating into herself. But there were also breakthroughs. The first time William laughed at one of Pete's jokes, a real belly laugh that transformed his serious face. The first time Sarah called Adelaide Mama, tentatively, as if testing the word. The first time both children came running when Austin arrived home from working the far pasture, excited to tell him about their day. 2 years passed, and William and Sarah became as much a part of the ranch as the cattle and the horses. William took to ranch work like he was born to it, following Austin and Pete around and absorbing everything they taught him. Sarah was quieter but no less capable, helping Adelaide in the garden and with the household tasks. Both children thrived under the care and consistency they had never had before. And then, on a spring morning 6 years after Adelaide and Austin married, Adelaide woke feeling strange. She was dizzy, and the smell of coffee made her stomach turn. She thought perhaps she was coming down with something, but the illness did not progress. She was just queasy in the mornings and tired. And after 2 weeks of this, along with certain other signs, an impossible thought occurred to her. She went to see Dr. Harrison in town, saying nothing to Austin about her suspicions. She could not bear to get his hopes up if she was wrong. Dr. Harrison examined her thoroughly, asked many questions, and then sat back with a look of wonder on his face. "Mrs. Drake, I do not know how to explain this, but you are pregnant. About 6 weeks along, I would say." Adelaide stared at him. "That is impossible. I was told I could never conceive." "I know. I have your medical history, but medicine is not an exact science, Mrs. Drake. Sometimes the body heals in ways we do not understand. Sometimes what seems impossible happens anyway." He smiled. "You are going to have a baby." Adelaide rode home in a daze, pregnant. After 6 years of marriage, after adopting William and Sarah, after accepting that she would never carry a child, she was pregnant. It seemed like a dream or a miracle. She found Austin in the barn, mending a saddle. He looked up when she entered, and his smile faded when he saw her expression. "Adelaide, what is wrong? Are you all right?" "I am fine," she said, and then she started crying, which rather contradicted her words. "Austin, I went to see Dr. Harrison today." Austin was at her side in an instant, pulling her close. "What did he say? Are you ill?" "No." Adelaide pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face but a smile on her lips. "Austin, I am pregnant." Austin went very still. "You are what?" "Pregnant. Going to have a baby. The doctor said it should not be possible, but it is happening anyway." Adelaide laughed through her tears. "We are going to have a baby, Austin." For a long moment, Austin just stared at her. Then he let out a whoop of joy loud enough to startle the horses and spun Adelaide around in a circle. "A baby! We are going to have a baby. Careful," Adelaide protested, laughing. "You will make me dizzy." Austin set her down gently as if she were made of glass. "I cannot believe it. After all this time, it is a miracle." "That is what I thought." Adelaide took his hands. "Are you happy?" "Happy, Adelaide, I am beyond happy, I am." He seemed to run out of words and just pulled her close again, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. They told William and Sarah that evening over dinner. Both children were confused at first, having no real understanding of where babies came from, but they grasped that there would be a new person joining the family. "Will you send us away?" William asked, his old fears surfacing. "If you have your own baby, will you send us back?" "Never," Austin said firmly. "You are our children just as much as this new baby will be. Nothing will change that. Do you understand? You will be a big brother and a big sister," Adelaide added. "The baby will need you to help teach them things and protect them. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded solemnly. "I can teach the baby about dolls and flowers." William still looked uncertain, but some of the fear had left his eyes. "I can teach them about horses," he offered. "That would be perfect," Austin said. The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Adelaide's age, now 31, being on the older side for a first-time mother. Adelaide glowed with health, and Austin fussed over her enough that she finally had to tell him to stop treating her like an invalid. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. she said with some exasperation when he insisted she should not be lifting anything heavier than a teacup. "I am perfectly capable of doing normal activities." "But you are carrying our miracle," Austin protested. "I want to make sure nothing goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong." Adelaide kissed him. "But I appreciate your concern. Just tone it down a notch, please." As Adelaide's belly grew, she found herself reflecting on how strange and wonderful life was. 6 years ago, she had been fleeing Boston and an unwanted marriage, convinced her life was over. Now she had a husband she adored, 2 children she loved as fiercely as if she had given birth to them, and a baby on the way that should not even exist. She wrote to her Aunt Margaret, who had retired from running the boarding house the previous year due to her advancing age and continuing health problems. Margaret's joy at the news was evident in every line of her reply. She promised to come stay at the ranch for a few weeks after the baby arrived to help Adelaide adjust. Adelaide did not write to her father. She had not communicated with him since sending a brief letter after her wedding to let him know she was married and would not be returning to Boston. He had not replied. As far as Adelaide was concerned, that chapter of her life was closed. The baby arrived on a cold November morning after a labor that lasted 12 hours. Dr. Harrison attended, with Margaret assisting. Austin wore a path in the porch planks, pacing and praying, while Pete and Carlos tried to distract William and Sarah with chores. When the baby's cry finally split the air, Austin nearly fell over with relief. Margaret came to the door, beaming. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy, loud son, and Adelaide is fine. Tired, but fine." Austin went inside on shaking legs. Adelaide lay in their bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle of blankets. She looked up when Austin entered and smiled. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Austin approached as if in a dream and looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through Austin. He felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Austin whispered. "You are amazing." "We made him together," Adelaide said. She held the baby out to Austin, who took his son with trembling hands. The baby weighed almost nothing, a warm and solid presence against Austin's chest. "What should we name him?" Austin asked. Adelaide smiled. "I was thinking Andrew." "Andrew Drake. What do you think, Andrew?" Austin repeated, testing the name. "I like it." "Andrew Jonathan Drake, after my father." "Perfect." William and Sarah were allowed in to meet their new brother, both of them wide-eyed and careful. Sarah was particularly entranced, stroking Andrew's tiny hand with one finger. "He is so small," she breathed. "You were that small once," Adelaide told her. "Everybody starts out tiny." "Can I hold him?" William asked, trying to sound nonchalant but unable to hide his eagerness. Austin showed William how to support Andrew's head and carefully transferred his son to his oldest son's arms. William held Andrew like he was made of spun glass, staring down at him with an expression of fierce protectiveness that reminded Austin of the first day they met, when William had stood between Sarah and the world. "I will take care of him," William said seriously. "I promise. Nobody will hurt him while I am around." "I know you will," Austin said, putting a hand on William's shoulder. "You are a good big brother." The first months with a new baby were challenging. Andrew was a fussy baby, prone to colic and wanting to be held constantly. Adelaide was exhausted from nursing him every few hours. Austin tried to help where he could, walking Andrew around the house in the middle of the night to give Adelaide a break, but there was only so much he could do. But they managed, with help from Margaret and the ever-present support of Pete and Carlos. William and Sarah adjusted to having a baby in the house, learning to play quietly during Andrew's naps and helping with small tasks like fetching diapers or rocking the cradle. By the time Andrew was 6 months old, he had become a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and babbled constantly. By a year, he was walking and getting into everything. By 2, he was a whirlwind of energy, always moving, always exploring. William, now 11, had grown into a capable young man, tall and strong for his age. He was Austin's shadow, learning everything he could about running a ranch. Sarah, 9, was Adelaide's constant companion, helping with cooking and sewing and learning her letters with a facility that suggested she might be a scholar if given the chance. The family fell into rhythms and routines. Mornings began early with everyone doing their assigned chores before breakfast. Days were spent working, learning, playing. Evenings were for family time, gathered around the dinner table or on the porch, talking about their days. It was the life Adelaide had dreamed of in Boston but never thought she would have. It was the future Austin had hoped for but feared might never materialize. It was, in short, happiness. One evening, when Andrew was 3 and William and Sarah were 13 and 11 respectively, Adelaide found Austin sitting on the porch alone, watching the sunset. She sat down beside him and took his hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything," Austin said. "How different life is from what I expected. How lucky I am." "We both are," Adelaide agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember that day with the stagecoach? It feels like a lifetime ago now." "I remember every second of it. The fear when I realized you were in danger. The relief when I managed to stop the horses. The way you looked at me when I opened the door." Austin squeezed her hand. "I knew right then that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much." "I knew too," Adelaide admitted. "I thought I was crazy. I had just nearly died, and all I could think about was how handsome you were and how kind your eyes were." She laughed softly. "My father would have been horrified. A proper Boston lady does not fall in love with a cowboy at first sight." "Good thing you are not a proper Boston lady then." "No, I suppose I am not. I am a rancher's wife, a mother, a Texan." Adelaide turned to look at Austin. "I am exactly who I was meant to be thanks to you." "Thanks to us," Austin corrected. "We built this together." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep purple. From inside the house came the sounds of their children. William helping Sarah with her reading. Andrew singing a nonsense song at the top of his lungs. It was chaotic and loud and messy and absolutely perfect. "Austin," Adelaide said suddenly, "do you remember what I whispered to you that day? After you rescued me when I first got down from the stagecoach," Austin thought back. The memory was vivid even after all these years. Adelaide standing beside him, pale and shaken. The way she had leaned in close, her voice barely audible. "You said, I think you just saved my life." "No," Adelaide said. "I mean, yes, I said that first. But then, while you were checking on Mr. Hutchins, I said something else. Something I thought you maybe had not heard because you did not react." Austin searched his memory and found it. Adelaide's voice, soft and wondering. "I think I am going to marry you someday." "I heard that," Austin admitted. "I just did not know how to respond. I thought you were delirious from the shock. I certainly did not think you meant it." "But I did mean it," Adelaide said. "I do not know how I knew, but I did. Standing there in the dust, having just nearly died, I looked at you and I knew. You were the one I had been waiting for." She smiled. "I thought I was crazy. If you were crazy, then I was too, because I knew the same thing." Austin pulled her closer. "I loved you from that first moment, and I have loved you every moment since. Even when I am stubborn and argumentative and refuse to let you win at checkers, especially then." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was more than either of them had dared dream. Behind them, their children laughed, safe and loved and secure. Above them, the stars began to appear, millions of them in the vast Texas sky watching over all of it. The years continued to pass. William grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Austin's body grew older and less willing to handle the most strenuous work. At 20, William married a girl from town named Emma, and they built a small house on the north edge of the ranch property. Their first child, a daughter they named Adelaide, was born a year later. Sarah became a teacher, just like Adelaide had been. She took over the school Adelaide had started, expanding it and eventually convincing the town to build a proper schoolhouse. She married a doctor named Thomas who set up practice in Gonzales, and together they had 3 children who kept Sarah busy and happy. Andrew, the miracle baby, grew up to be a dreamer and an artist. He loved the ranch but was more interested in drawing horses than working with them. Austin and Adelaide encouraged his talent, and at 18, Andrew went to study art in San Antonio. He eventually came back to Gonzales and made his living painting portraits and landscapes, documenting the changing face of Texas for future generations. Austin and Adelaide grew old together, their hair going gray and then white, their faces crinkling with laugh lines. The ranch prospered under William's management, growing to become one of the most successful in the region. The house was constantly full of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, chaos and joy in equal measure. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole extended family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were now too many of them to fit inside, so tables were set up in the yard. The evening was warm and clear, perfect for a party. After dinner, Adelaide's youngest grandchild, a 6-year-old girl named Rose, climbed into her lap. "Grandma, tell us the story about how you met Grandpa." Adelaide looked at Austin, who smiled and nodded. It was a story they had told many times over the years, but it never got old. "Well," Adelaide began, settling Rose more comfortably. "It was a very hot day in July, 30 years ago. I was on a stagecoach heading to Gonzales for the first time. I was scared and alone and had no idea what my future held. And then the horses ran away," Rose said, having heard the story before but wanting to hear it again. "That is right. The horses ran away and I thought I was going to die. But then, out of nowhere, a cowboy on a beautiful horse appeared. He was the bravest man I had ever seen." "Do you know who that cowboy was, Grandpa?" Rose crowed. "That is right. Your grandpa saved my life that day, and later when we were alone for just a moment I whispered something to him. Do you know what I said?" Rose shook her head enthralled. Adelaide looked at Austin across the yard, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, the legacy of a love that started with a whisper and a runaway stagecoach. "I said, I think I am going to marry you someday, and I did, and we lived happily ever after." "That is the best story," Rose sighed contentedly. "Yes," Adelaide agreed. "Yes, it is." That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Austin and Adelaide sat on the porch one last time. It was their tradition, even after 30 years. No matter how busy the day, they always made time to sit together and watch the sunset. 30 years, Austin said, shaking his head in wonder. "Where did the time go?" "Into building this." Adelaide gestured at the ranch, the house, the life they had created. "Into raising our children and loving each other. I would not change a single day of it. Not even the hard parts, not even those. The hard parts made us stronger." Adelaide took his hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after so many years. "I love you, Austin Drake." Today, tomorrow, and forever. I love you too, Adelaide Drake. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat together as the sun set on another day, another year, another chapter of their lives. The sky blazed with color, orange and pink and gold, as magnificent as the first sunset they had watched together 30 years before. And in that moment, with her hand in his and their family safe around them, Adelaide knew that she had found what she had been looking for all along. Not just love, though there was plenty of that. Not just security or happiness or fulfillment, though she had all of those too. She had found home. Not a place, but a person. Not a destination, but a journey shared with the one who mattered most. The stagecoach had been running away that day, wild and out of control. But it had been running toward Austin, toward the life they would build together. It had been running toward home. And that, Adelaide thought as she leaned her head on Austin's shoulder and watched the stars begin to appear, was the greatest miracle of all.